Yo, music, live streaming, human beings on your screens. I mean, that music's for real though. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. And I'm hearing myself in my, so here's, I'm gonna pop these out and just go live and I'll put these back in. You are seeing a totally magnificent, magnetic, and magical combination of forces right now. I wanna thank you for tuning in. Who am I? What are we doing here? My name is Baratunde Thurston. I'm a writer, I'm an activist, I'm a comedian. I talk trash, I host things. I care about this intersection of race, tech, democracy, and climate. I do a lot of that work through a podcast called How to Citizen, where we make citizen a verb. I used to do it for places like The Onion and The Daily Show. I have a program coming out this summer on PBS called America Outdoors. And all those forces really land beautifully right here, right now with you for this special live streaming program. Let me tell you a bit about what we've been through and why we're here together. I want you to think about the century that we're in, the 1/5 of the way through, and what we've seen so far. We've seen 9/11, the Iraq War, the birth and rise of ISIS, a Syrian refugee crisis, the mass murder of indigenous peoples all over the world. Not to mention surging fires and floods and heat waves and hurricanes, the killing of children in Yemen and Tigray, the desecration of clean air, healthy eating, and a habitable world for ourselves and our descendants. We're in the midst of a global extinction that's worse than the thing that destroyed the dinosaurs. And we're in the midst of the current invasion of Ukraine. All these threads, all these tragedies, they share something. They have something in common. They couldn't have happened without the funding from oil oligarchs. Oligarchs? Is that a thing? Can I just make up a new word? Oligarchs. Let's do that. We're minting new words on this blockchain of humanity right here. Now the world has come together, snapped to attention, dropped into formation real quick to rise against one oil oligarch, one dangerous petrocrat, Vladimir Putin. Thankfully, the world is divesting from Putin's oil, but tragically, the response by other oil oligarchs and their minions and media is still, at this late date, with all we know, drill, baby, drill. Doubling down by creating even more oil oligarchy, more extraction, more self-destruction. It reminds me of the movie Don't Look Up, one of the most streamed films in history. Don't Look Up does a strangely good job of using absurd satire to help us better understand the absurdity of our global situation. In the film, spoiler alert, a comet is hurtling towards Earth. And instead of rallying together, we experience instead this reactionary, divisive, disinformational campaign that says, don't look up. Don't look up at the reality of our situation. Put your head in the sand and just pretend it's not happening. But the protagonists in the film, they launch a movement called Just Look Up, pleading with humanity to just look up at the comet, at reality, to face it, face the apocalypse in order to protect ourselves and each other, which is really the only way to protect ourselves, is if we protect each other and not just each human other. Here we have art imitating life, imitating art. And the movement that thinks the answer to defunding Putin's petrostate is to continue to drill, baby, drill. They're the don't look up crowd of the IRL world. You got big tech billionaires like Elon Musk saying, we need to push to drill more oil. Reminds me a bit of the character in the movie Peter Isherwell, who leads to the entire world being destroyed by a comet. I'm sorry, again, spoiler alert, but it's worth knowing how this ends in the movie so it doesn't end that way in real life. You see, there's still hope. Just as the real world Don't Look Up movement is gaining speed, so is a real world Just Look Up alliance. Indigenous wisdom that the earth is not just a thing to be financialized and extracted from, but a part of us to help us all live. That movement is rising. Renewable energy is spreading and getting cheaper as it's powered by the wind and sun. And yo, let me ask you this, where's the sun? Just look up. Where is the sun? Do it right now. Do it with me. Just look up. Even if, like me, you're inside and there's technically a ceiling between, you know what I'm saying? It's symbolic. The sun is still there. So today we're going to talk with leaders of this Just Look Up alliance, both Indigenous people and Ukrainians fighting for their sovereignty from big oil, visionaries ready to supply Europe with electric heat pumps to wean themselves off of big oil, a plan to tax big oil for its greedy gas gouging prices and give that money back to the hands of ordinary people. We got youth climate activists and some of the most brilliant artists of our time who are inspiring all of us to imagine a better world and then go build it, including the very artist behind Don't Look Up. So stick around as together we create a Just Look Up alliance. The plan today, we got these special guests. We got Adam McKay, we got Meryl Streep, we got Bill McKibben, we've got Indigenous leaders, Ukrainian activists, climate representatives from across the world, and we got you. So use that hashtag Just Look Up. Grab your friends, grab your family, let them know to tune into the stream right now. We've got information, inspiration, calls to action, and more. And speaking of more, let's get right into our next segment because I'm bringing on a very, very dope artist and activist. Many of you know him as Marvel's The Hulk. He's an Oscar-nominated actor, a climate activist, a very early proponent of banning fracking. I just saw him crush it in The Atom Project. Please welcome Mark Ruffalo. What up, Mark?
Hey, Baratunde. So glad to be with you, man. That was a really beautiful opening and framing for this conversation. Thank you.
Yo, you're so welcome. And I've seen your work on screen. I've seen your work on the ground. And in this Just Look Up Alliance live stream, we are blending movies, art, climate activism. You are both. Do you see yourself as part of a larger tradition of artists working for social change?
Absolutely. Going way back, not way back, but one of the people who I sat down early with was Harry Belafonte, and I was just asking him how do you do this? How do you make this a career? How do you do a career and do this work? And he was just like, you'll know when the time is right, and you'll know when to jump in, and you'll know how deeply to jump. I studied with Stella Adler, who said that every artist had a responsibility to the culture and the people of the time that they're living in, and that it was part of your responsibility to be political and to fight for those people whose voices could not reach the public the way we could. And that the playwrights, she used to say, people should have to pay to go to church and the theater should be free, because she knew how important it was, the platform that we had and the melding of those messages and acting. Get rid of that thing. So then there's Jane Fonda, who I've been following in her footsteps with this, and Leonardo Dicaprio, who's been doing it for years before I came along. So it's I feel like I'm part of a rich tradition of actors, musicians, activists, artists who are been carrying this work since the beginning of time.
That long-standing tradition is nice to hear you acknowledge, especially Brother Belafonte. One of the things I've really noticed you lean into is Indigenous issues. I'd love you to share a bit more about your journey on that. And then to my knowledge, you are not a member of any Indigenous nations. So how did you come to care so much, start showing up so much, and transition from that into this No Dirty Banks work that you've been working on lately? What have you been
Sure.
learning?
Honestly, it started. I have the lived experience of being a frontliner. I moved my family to upstate New York in the mid 2000s.
On that, to my knowledge, you are not a member of any Indigenous nations. So how did you come to care so much, start showing up so much, and sorry, I think I transition from that into this dirty bank?
Yeah, so I got to hear you twice on that question. I think there's a repeat, but I moved my family to upstate New York in mid 2000s, and it was right in the front lines of fracking. We moved right into the gaslands, and while I was here, I was asked to join that fight, and I did. And along the way, we were enjoined by our native brothers and sisters here in unceded territory, which I live in, of the Lenape people. And it was a Lenape, it was a Haudenosaunee, it was an Onondaga nation. And we were fighting arm in arm. And that was a 5-year struggle. And I was invited into their ceremony. And I learned from their history and their culture. And what I learned was the resilience. They had been systematically were wiped out, or the white people here attempted to wipe them out. And they had so much soul and belief and joy in their work. And they were lifting me up time and time again when things looked the darkest and scariest, and felt like we were going to lose. And they were like, no, brother, we just keep praying, and we're here. So we've already won. The fact that we exist at all tells you everything there is to know. And then I ended up at Standing Rock. And again, I was brought into their ceremony, Inipe and the teepees. And it's just been a big part of my life, and reconnecting me with our relationship to everything. There's a saying, a word, it's a prayer, 2 words, Madakwie Oyase, which means we are related. We are all related. And that means the fish, the animals in the sky, the animals on the earth, the plants, the sea, our brothers and sisters of the human race, and the stars and the universe. And so those things have resonated with me. They give me deep meaning. And so I keep finding myself fighting for this group of people who really are the dirty secret of the world. I mean, they are probably the most brutalized, marginalized, not the most, but in there, and with so little justice coming their way.
You reminded me of an experience I had just last summer with the Shoshone-Bannock people in Idaho, and we were there to do. They have a salmon ceremony every year, and they kept referring to Brother Salmon and Father Tree and these relations that go beyond us. Trees are kind of lungs outside of our body, not just objects to be harvested for productive, quote unquote, use. So I'm so glad you had such an authentic entry point in something where you found shared interest, and learned some more about the folks who were here first in so many different ways. I want to make space for Alex Ebert to join us and talk about what you both have been working on to help honor that legacy and ensure a better future with this No More Dirty Banks campaign. Folks tuning in now may know Alex from his stage name, Edward Sharpe, which is part of his band Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. He's a Golden Globe winning composer. But what you may not know is that he's a very, very committed activist, much like Mark here, very committed activist. He's recently published an open letter in Variety that got some of Hollywood's biggest stars signing on, demanding that the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, divest from the Coastal GasLink pipeline, or they would take their money out of its subsidiary City National Bank. Alex Ebert, welcome. Come on in. Are you here?
I'm here.
Good, good, good. So tell us about your experiences with this campaign and standing with the Wet'suwet'en people. I understand that RBC didn't really take kindly to being called out like that in a trade publication.
Yeah, no, they didn't take kindly to it. Actually, they created a whole bunch of hijinks to delay the letter and stuff that, you know, sort of beside the point. But in 2016, around the time of Standing Rock, I'm with a bunch of celebrities and we're all sort of into this bank divestment thing. We've realized that
Ooh, we make a little freeze. Did we get a freeze or is it on my end? This is the beauty of the live streaming era.
And they'd be like, our bank's clean, right? And they'd be like, yeah, our bank's clean. And by our bank, everybody knew we were talking about City National Bank because every single actor and musician banks at City National Bank. They've completely cornered the market. We make up 25% of its clientele. But then I started a website called howtodivest.com. And I'm like, wait, let me just make sure. And I do a quick Google search. I'm like, City National Bank subsidiary. Well, it turns out City National Bank is now an RBC company. I'm like, what's RBC again? I look it up. It's Royal Bank of Canada. Royal was funding some of that pipeline back then. And then, you know, so I write this open letter. I'm like, hey, listen, guys, our bank isn't clean. Our bank is a subsidiary of one of the most aggressive financiers of extractive, extreme fossil fuel extraction and transport. So I write a letter back then, it goes up the poll and we have some movement. RBC then says, we're going to go carbon neutral or carbon zero by 2050. It's like, okay, that's very far away and whatever. And now they say, okay, well, we're transporting low carbon gas. Carbon gas is actually high methane gas. And methane's like 85 more heat trapping than carbon dioxide. So it's a whole, you know, situation. So anyway, then I fall into an activist coma over COVID. I don't know what's going on. I haven't been watching anything.
I love that. Yes, activist.
And I get a call from Mark, and he's like, "Do you know what's going on?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Tell me." And he's like, "Look," and he gives me the lowdown on the Wet'suwet'en situation. And of course, that this time RBC isn't just a bit player; they're the lead financier. So our bank, an RBC, is again, and this time leading the charge on these violations of Indigenous rights. So I'm like, okay, I'm back. And you know, like to your point, to Mark's point about Belafonte saying you'll know when the time is, like, okay, I've been slumbering for 2 years, it's time. So I wrote up a new letter, and Mark helped out a lot. He introduced me to Melina and Chief Namox, who are here with us today, along with Slado and a bunch of other and I got to really know the issue, wrote the letter, and we did an open letter. And yeah, I mean, the real deal is that these banks, you know, these companies don't finance these things themselves. I don't know if anyone really understands that. These companies don't finance, Exxon doesn't finance Exxon things. They go to banks and they get money from banks and they finance. So the people we really got to press are these banks.
What I'm appreciating is there's a level of understanding power, you know, in actions like this. And a lot of us feel very powerless when it comes to how do you change a big thing? How do you stop a looming threat? And so here's one pressure point in the system, the financing of the project. Well, who else is invested in that financing? Oh, Hollywood stars. It turns out these folks have a monopoly on them. So it just feels really savvy. And to the audience who've not heard the term Wet'suwet'en before, this is the indigenous nation whose land this pipeline would be operating. Is that correct? Is that an accurate reflection?
Yeah, that's exactly right. This pipeline's being built straight through this pristine territory of the Wet'suwet'en, and imminently about to be dug under the Wet'suwet'en River, otherwise known as the Maurice River, which is like their actual drinking water and one of the best salmon runs in the world. And pipelines burst all the time, like 10 bursts a day. I'm making that up, but it is literally like some amount in the doubles burst every day. There's very little oversight on these things, and it almost guaranteed to destroy some of this. And it's just it's a travesty.
Yeah. Well, the turning that travesty into an opportunity for people to use whatever power they have to get something done, that's the opposite, right? That's the life that comes out of potential death. And you set this up at nomoredirtybanks.com. So I want to encourage folks watching now, check out nomoredirtybanks.com to learn more, to sign up, to take action. Maybe you're not a celebrity with an account at City National Bank, but maybe you know some. Maybe you are a fan of someone and you could check with them and remind them. Many people don't even know that they have this opportunity to try to exert pressure to preserve our only habitable planet in this particular way. And speaking of Wet'suwet'en, I'd love to bring in the voices more directly, of this community, of this nation. We'll be joined by Hereditary Chief Na'Moks. Title he carries as Chief Na'Moks is literally thousands of years old, as are all the hereditary chief titles of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. Alongside Mark, we're going to be joined with Melina Laboken Massimo, here to speak with us more about this No More Dirty Banks campaign. Melina is a longtime Indigenous activist from the Cree Nation who's been on the front lines of water and land protection, divestment, and climate work for over 20 years. That's a way of saying that Melina has earned a well-earned rest. Yet she's here. Chief Na'Moks is here. Now, Melina is the co-founder of Indigenous Climate Action and the founder of Sacred Earth Solar. Welcome. I see everybody's on the screen together. Thank you so much for making even more time and space in a world that's taken so much time and space. Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you're doing. The world is just starting to learn about the Colonial Gas Link, the CGL pipeline, and its violation of Indigenous rights. Can you tell me, Chief Na'Moks, first, what have you had to endure, at the hands of militarized police? Perhaps more importantly, how have you endured it? So many folks don't even know this story. Can you kind of drop us in with what this experience has been?
Absolutely. I will start. Traditionally, it's Denizate, Tsakazate, Skyzate. That is male chiefs, leaders, those who will be leaders, those who are chiefs. Tsakazate is females. They are the true source of where we come from. They gave us life. They are the leaders. They are the future generations. And Skyzate, those who will be chiefs, those who will be leaders. And that is all of you. This opportunity to stand up together, united, makes you powerful. It makes everybody powerful. It takes that power away from industries and government that want to ruin the land and the planet. They enhance this climate crisis we're in every day. I was born in a time of crisis. I do not know a day from my childhood on when we were not in crisis management. Do you know that we're one of the last? Our 22,000 square kilometers, unceded, non-treaty, undefeated lands is one of the last to have European contact in North America. This is why we keep it so pristine. In my lifetime, as I said, Europeans didn't exist on our territory in my grandmother's time, and she carried the name of Na'Moks. When she passed on, the name was passed on to my uncle, to caretaker, until I was ready. That's how long they take to prepare you. I love the very fact that before my grandmother was Chief Na'Moks, she was the Candian Kia. That means big voice. That means speak for the trees, speak for the animals, speak for the fish, speak for the water, speak for the... That's what the Candian Kia means. And it's more than the damage that they're doing to the land. It's what they're doing to us spiritually. When they come to our doors with axes and power saws to get at our people, our women, and they call that legal in Canada. When they come to rip up our graves, our sacred sites, that's illegal in our law, but it is legal in Canada. They get a permit, they do it. I often say, if I went to where your grandparents lived and I dug up their grave, I would go to jail. Here, it's permitted. Unfortunately, with all the violence that has come on us, we've come to expect it. We know every winter when the snow comes from the sky, so are the helicopters and the armed personnel. That is what happens every winter. I'll never be a refugee in our own territory, ever. This is home. We have nowhere to go. This is home. We're not going to be a burden on somebody else. We have a right to be on our land. We have a right to be Wet'suwet'en. We have a right to be human. You know, they ask, how do we endure it? I don't know anything else except to be Wet'suwet'en. I don't know anything else except to be Chief Na'moks. I don't know anything else except our Kunga, our history, where we come from, why we do it. We often say, and we speak because of what our elders and our former chiefs who have passed on now have said to us. We don't do it for ourselves, we do it for the future. We do it for the betterment of all. I remember my grandmother speaking. When she talked about the world, she didn't just mean Wet'suwet'en territory. She didn't just mean British Columbia. She didn't just mean North America. She talked about the world. They seen what was coming. They know, and we know, that when they come in with these here boom and bust mentality that, you know, the environment is only a price. Human rights, Indigenous rights are only something that they need to overcome and ignore. That is not right. That's why the importance of being together in all of these actions, reminding each other that we're all human. We all need clean water. We all need clean air. We all need good food. And for us, like I said, in this short period of time, the damage that they've done and what they plan to do is irreversible. It is what we do today that can change it. Tomorrow is too late in my mind. You know, we allow elected officials to make decisions, and they're steered by industry. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. We stand up and we're criminalized for being Wet'suwet'en. We're criminalized for protecting clean water, the air. You know, water flows and the wind blows. We look beyond our boundaries of our nation to what the world and how we affect them. We look at how it affects everybody downstream. We look at how it affects everybody that breathe air. This clean air that we breathe. It's like the snow in behind me here. I've been to places where the snow is black. That's not right. I've been to places where you can't drink the water.
There's places where it's not snowing, and it used to. There's so much radical change, and I appreciate your insistence on your existence, Chief Na'moks. It's really, really powerful to experience you in this way. I'd love to layer in Melina as a part of this conversation. Melina living in being from one of the largest fossil fuel extraction zones in the world, these Alberta tar sands. Melina, can you tell us more about the No More Dirty Banks campaign? I saw as we were gathered in the green room before, there was familiarity with you and Mark and Chief Na'moks, like y'all hang out all the time. And Alex, what's going on from your perspective with the campaign? What's it been like living through this difficulty and this challenge?
Hi, thank you. Tansegwakia, Nia Melina Miawapan Labokan Masmo, Nia Nihiao Kinaskuntanawao. That is my language for saying greetings, everyone today that's joining us and listening to our voices going out into the world. I'm so grateful to be here with you all, Baratunde and Mark and Chief Na'moks, and all those that stand with us on this No More Dirty Banks campaign. And yeah, I mean, I come from an impacted community. I was born into a small reserve called Little Buffalo, and it is a Nihiao Indigenous Cree community. My childhood was back in the day when I grew up in the horse and wagon with my kukum and Musa, my grandmother and grandfather, and my family and community, that we went into the pristine, beautiful land that Chief Na'moks just talked about. In our territory, it is now one of the largest industrial extraction zones on the planet. It's called the tar sands, the Alberta tar sands. At the age of 7, by the time I was 7, my community was blockading oil and gas and logging companies that were encroaching into our homelands, invading our homelands and taking over. And now, just within my lifetime, the level of destruction is staggering, to the tune of, we have by 2014 was #1 in deforestation in the world because of the Alberta tar sands. So we're talking about impact zones where we once, as I was a child, had living, thriving, pristine ecosystems are now completely contaminated, toxic zones. And we're talking about the largest industrial impact zone, as big as destroying the entire state of Florida, as big as in destroying England and Wales combined. We're talking about refineries, upgraders, making it hard for communities to breathe, massive oil spills in my community. We had a massive oil spill in 2011 where when people fly over, like Leonardo Dicaprio did, people call it Mordor. When I flew with Jane Fonda, she said it was Mordor, and it is hard to see. It is like a knife to the heart when you come to our homelands, because it is complete and utter destruction. And why we are targeting the Royal Bank of Canada is because they are the #1 financier of tar sands in the world. It's why tar sands is why Canada will never be able to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions like it agrees to at every international climate negotiation it's ever gone to. And even just within the last 2 years, we have seen banks increase tar sands funding by 50%. So this is why we talk about these issues like the No More Dirty Banks campaign, because our communities are sacrifice communities. We shoulder the brunt of environmental degradation and have now for 20, 30 years. And now the world is starting to feel that impact, that consequences through climate change because of Mother Earth's destruction. So RBC, let's be clear, is financing the destruction of my homelands all the way to the Wet'suwet'en people's homelands. I was at the RBC's AGM in 2009, so we've been looking at RBC's investment since, for over a decade. And it's not new, the human rights violations that they are implementing. And, RBC claims to be a climate conscious bank, but yet, since acquiring City National Bank, the Hollywood Bank of the Stars, RBC has spent over $160 billion in fossil fuel finance, which has made it one of the world's most aggressive tar sands and fossil fuel extraction financiers. And so that's why we've started the No More Bank campaign with Alex and Mark and Chief Namuks and the Wet'suwet'en people, hereditary chiefs. And we have 3 demands. 3 demands is RBC pull out of the CGL pipeline. RBC uphold and respect the rights of Indigenous peoples. RBC stop financing fossil fuel extraction, which is exacerbating the climate change. Because we need to be very clear. Banks are funding climate chaos, and this needs to stop. So please, please, please join us, sign the letter, and take action, like over 65 celebrities from Hollywood already have, at nomoredirtybanks.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melina. Mark, you're a celebrity. You know other celebrities, and I'm a celebrity in certain rooms, but not as globally as you. And what I do understand about this business is there's infrastructure in place. There's managers and agents and business managers, and they decide where a lot of folks in this business bank. There's like a package deal. It's probably how City National became so influential, is because a bunch of business managers brought all this business to them. How is this being received by your peers? Do you see folks being willing to pull away? Are you having difficult conversations with people, or are they getting it pretty quickly?
I have to say, like I said, I've been an activist for 10 years in this space, and I've asked a lot of my friends and colleagues to participate in one thing or another over the years, and I've never seen so many people just immediately jump on. I mean, I sent emails and texts out to probably 70, 80 people, and most of them responded within an hour or two. And it just goes to show how important this moment is, and how it crystallizes the kind of the movement that we're in. People understand coming out of COP26 that there's the governmental response to this is not going to be enough. And I also think people are finally understanding, like, where is this happening? And it's the funding. For years, I was saying, fund the fighters, fund the people on the front lines, and let them tell their stories, and give them money and give them the resources so the people can hear them, and then we'll make the changes. But now I'm starting to realize that's not enough. That's important, but now we have to fight the funders. We have to go after the funding. And this isn't just about RBC. This is about every bank, every major bank in the world right now, where all of us have our money today. And 10 years ago, Baratunde, there was nowhere else to go. But today there are. And there's new banks that are clean, where we can take our money. So this Drop Your Dirty Bank isn't just about RBC. It's about every bank. And if you want to do something really important on climate change, move your money away from where it's being spent to fund this. That's probably the most powerful thing we can do right now.
Who's who else has been signing on to this No More Dirty Banks campaign?
Oh, it's Leonardo DiCaprio. It's Scarlett Johansson, Robert Downey Jr., Meryl Streep now.
Susan
Susan Sarandon, Jane Fonda. I mean, the list goes on and on. Josh Gad. It's just a
so from the RBC side, from the Dirty Bank side, how are they responding? Are they blowing you off? Are they trying to salvage the business? Are they making promises that you're not sure they're willing to keep? What's their response been so far? Do you think they're scared?
I've been in talks with them for 2 months, and there was a lot of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I said, listen, meet with the chiefs. You haven't met with them ever. They've been asking for a meeting with you for 25 years. That took a lot of doing, and they finally did, and they heard the requests, and basically they refused to come to the follow-up meeting. And we couldn't get Dave McKay, the CEO, to have enough respect for the hereditary chiefs, the people who preceded Canada by thousands of years, who are the rightful title owners of the land that this pipeline is plowing through. He would not meet with them. And, it's this colonial thinking of, if the native, we'll consult, we'll listen to the native people unless they say no. And if they say no, then we'll just ignore them. We'll erase them. We'll pretend like they don't exist. And that's kind of what the response from RBC has been. Even right now, they're not responding. They threw out the premier of British Columbia yesterday to say, hey, actors, shut up, keep acting. You don't have any. What do you know about economies? What do you know about
dribble move?
Keep dribbling, keep doing what you do. No one wants to hear from you.
Right.
That's been
what's the in terms of the action? What are you, Alex, the Chiefs, Melina? Like, what are y'all? Is it letter writing? Is it tweeting? Is it aggressive phone calls? Are you going into the bank with suitcases to pull out all your cash? Like, what does this actually look like?
Who wants to take that? I've been talking a lot. Alex?
Well, Alex is not on the call, but I will say something really quick, but I do want to leave space for Chief Namox to respond. But for us at No More Dirty Banks, it is people, please go to the website. People learn about the issues and then also sign up in the tool. It's going to RBC, like a letter is going to RBC. Over 8,000 people have already sent a letter to RBC in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en people, in solidarity with impacted communities like mine, to see divestment happen from RBC and CNB and all banks, like Mark said. So it is take action, join us. We will be again at the Royal Bank of Canada's AGM on April 7th. So there's a lot of actions, and action happened yesterday in LA. So things on the ground, online, everywhere. So just join us at nomoredirtybanks.com, and I'll let Chief Namox say more, because it is his community.
Exactly as you say, like, to sit still and do nothing, you're actually agreeing with them. If you're silent, you're agreeing with them. You take those actions, you make those moves. Money doesn't have a conscience. Humans do. Use your conscience, use your heart, use what you know, and take those actions. If you actually think about it, it's only a couple of pieces of paper you got to fill out and you're done. It's not that hard. Aside.
Yeah. And also, just wanted to say, Baratunde, Mark is, has a little. He may switch over to a bank, So there's future things that are yet to be seen.
Yeah, listen, I've had phone calls. Everyone's reaching out to me like, where do we go? Where can we go? And we've been working on some places for people to land that we know are clean, that are already doing good work in the communities that we care about. And so there's a place to go, and people are ready to go. We're waiting on what is RBC going to do? What's CNB going to do? What's City National Bank? What are RBC going to do to stop this? That's the question.
And it seems to me, look, we're all kind of complicit, compromised, invested without our full conscious choice in a capitalist system, which involves being aligned with decisions we wouldn't make. So even the idea of a perfectly clean bank, for me, that feels like ideal, maybe not real, but certainly there are many cleaner banks. And the point is better, you know, like let's move away from something that's devastating and destructive to something that could actually be, you know, positive and regenerative and creative. This brings me to the ideological base and even the spiritual base of how we operate, you know, the narrative ocean, as I heard it described, that we actually swim in and assume to be true. And that is to say, the idea of capitalism and extraction and nature just as a financial resource isn't the only way to view the world. And it hasn't been the prevailing view of the world by all the peoples who've inhabited it for all this time. Indigenous wisdom has a different perspective on what our relationship could be, on how finance could work, on how a lot of things could work. And I'd love to hear from Chief Namox first. Do you see an increasing relevance of this longstanding perspective from Indigenous nations, given the crisis point that we are in right now?
You know, unfortunately, humans, they don't miss anything till it's gone. You know, it's just the way it is. With us, you know, as hereditary chiefs, we simply put forward the words that have been said ever since we became what's old, ever since Hudakai, the creator above us, the one that created land, air, water, put us here as caretakers. You know, will the mindset change? Well, it has to. There is no other choice. And we simply say, go to the very core of it. Clean air, clean water. Human cannot survive without that. And you know, this here extractive industries that they have is actually putting a price tag on everything that we have. This is why we fight so hard. This is why we fight so dearly. We give it our all. We always say for the betterment of all. And we say, you know, we are taking away the inheritance of our children, our grandchildren, every time we damage something. It is our duty to leave that inheritance of clean water, clean. It's really not that hard to grasp, except if you're in industry and except if you're an elected official. They can't grasp it. Money, again, does not have conscience. I don't know how to cook money. I sure know how to cook moose meat, salmon. I know how to do my vegetables, my berries, and my medicines. I don't know how to cook or eat money.
Yeah, money's not so tasty. Thank you for that. Mark, do you have any brief comment on being exposed to and kind of in both worlds here before I let Melina close this out, in terms of the world of capitalism and its extractive view versus, you know, what you've been exposed to and trying to amplify on the Indigenous perspective?
Only that we can transition away from this. You know, the one thing about the fossil fuel era is it did bring us a technological era and the industrial era. And I want to thank them for it. But we're ready to move on, and we have the technology to do it today. And, you know, let us go. You know, stop impeding us. Stop using the governmental levers of power to stay in power. You know, you got what you wanted. You got what you needed. You have more money than you could ever want. And let us be. Let us take the world into a more just, you know, non-extractive economy that shares with all of us. And it's the Indigenous people, why we keep seeing this story told over and over and over again throughout the world, where Indigenous people are on the front line, is because they are the keepers of the future. And they are a commodity to us that we have to, they're holding the wisdom now to save the planet, to save the species, to save all the creatures. And we have to put them in leadership now. We can't keep ignoring them. We've ignored them for so long, and now it's time to give them a place at the table and follow their wisdom and instruction.
You're at this table with us right now, Chief Namox. Thank you so much, Mark Ruffalo. Thank you so much, Melina. Any closing thoughts, considerations, words before we go to our first break?
I think really for us to truly solve the climate crisis, we need a global paradigm shift back to understanding and living within the natural laws of Mother Earth. And this is a widespread understanding of Indigenous people and what we have always known. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. And humanity has lost this sacred connection to Mother Earth, and that's why we are now living in an era of consequence. So we must protect the people that are safeguarding 80% of the world's biodiversity, which is Indigenous peoples. But yet we are being criminalized around the world, here in Canada and all across the world for standing up to protect our homeland. So please stand with us. Go to nomoredirtybanks.com. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us and letting us speak today. Hi.
Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Chief Namox. Thank you, Mark Ruffalo. I'm Baratunde Thurston. You're tuned in to the Just Look Up Alliance live stream, where we're connecting threads between Ukraine, between the earth, between Indigenous wisdom, and the power we have through our money to change the circumstances involving all of that. We have a brief video to share with you. And when we come back, we're going to speak with a Ukrainian climate activist. We're going to hear from Bill McKibben. We got Meryl Streep in the house. So I'm trying to act cool about it. I'm not cool. I'm freaking out inside. This is acting cool. So please stay tuned. Visit nomoredirtybanks.com. Throw out that hashtag #JustLookUp to your networks if that's how you can use your power, and tune in to this brief video. I'll be right back.
Right now, major banks like the Royal Bank of Canada are financing a fracked gas pipeline bulldozing through the land of the Wet'suwet'en Nation in northern British Columbia, Canada. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs never consented to this pipeline construction through their territories, which would risk the sacred headwaters of the Wazinqua River. But here's where it gets complicated. The Supreme Court of Canada recognized Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs as rightful title holders of the land. But corporations still get away with consulting only elected leadership put in place by the colonial government and not the rightful title holders. And what makes this even more urgent is a recent militarized police violence by the Canadian police, the RCMP. For the last 3 years, and as recently as last November, the RCMP violently arrested and detained non-violent Indigenous land defenders and journalists.
You're trespassing on Wet'suwet'en land!
Publicly, RBC makes grand commitments to respect Indigenous rights, ethical investing, and climate action promises. But not only is RBC funding this pipeline to the tune of $315 million, it is the linchpin to a $6.5 billion loan backed by 26 other banks. Even though RBC has made commitments to Indigenous human rights, they continue to fund Coastal GasLink's violence against the Wet'suwet'en people.
Welcome, madam. Can we just hear the level?
This is our land, our sacred headwaters, Wazinqua, which is the lifeblood of our entire nation. CGL is racing to complete drilling to microtunnel under the Wazinqua without the consent of the hereditary chiefs. RBC's financial ties to this project make them responsible for endangering our drinking water, our salmon, and criminalizing us as Wet'suwet'en people on our own land. RBC's AGM is coming up on April 7th. They'll be announcing their sustainable business practices and the immense profits to their shareholders and to the public. Help us hold them accountable for funding genocide.
And we're back. Hello again. My name is Baratunde Thurston, and I am your host with the most, your MC with the Wi-Fi. I don't know why I said Wi-Fi. I was trying to rhyme, and that's not really the thing that I do. I'm a writer, I'm an activist, I'm a comedian, and mostly I'm honored to be gathered here today with such a powerful network of people all over the world: artists, activists, Indigenous leaders, youth climate activists, folks who are trying to make a difference, encouraging us to just look up as we face what can be an impending crisis, but turn it into a much bigger opportunity to renew not just our energy sources, but our spirit as people. If you're just tuning in, please check out nomoredirtybanks.com. It's real action that you can take and encourage those in your network to take to defund the destruction of our only home planet. Right now, we are going to focus our attention on a member of society that many of us have been paying a lot more attention to lately, the nation of Ukraine. I'd like to welcome with me here right now, Svetlana Romanco. Come on down, join me on this screen. Svetlana is a Ukrainian climate activist. How are you right now, Svetlana? First of all, just acknowledging you. My heart's with you. How are you feeling in this very moment?
Yeah, thank you so much, Baratunde, and everyone who is watching. I know and feel this greatest global solidarity, and thank you so much for your thoughts that you are sending us across the globe. And currently, I am so happy to be here and to share our thoughts about this fossil-fueled war in Ukraine and the climate crisis. I'm here because I don't want to see the world respond to this war by doubling down on fossil fuels, the same that have led us to this crisis moment. I want the fossil fuel era and this war to be ended once and forever, and for everyone on this planet, in Yemen or in some other country. I appreciate that we can put our joint effort and end the wars everywhere. And going back to Ukrainian reality, it's completely unsafe. And right now, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are under constant and heavy fire and bombardment without food, water, electricity, or basic human rights, or sanitation, or communication in the eastern, central, and southern Ukraine. We wake up to explosions. That's become like a new normal, but I don't want it to be normal. We should not take this as our new reality, and we should always resist. And we are terrorized by all day and night air alarms and these missiles and shellings from Russia side, and Russian troops are bombarding maternity hospitals, theaters where 1,000 people was hiding in a basement, in a bomb shelter, houses and safety corridors, and killing civilians, children and families on the roads, in their homes and in hospitals. And many of our cities in the eastern part have been entirely destroyed. And this will cost us much to rebuild it, and morally and ethically, and not just financially. And 10 million people have been internally displaced to the west from the east, but we welcome them in our houses because they are Ukrainians who just lost everything with this horrific war. And this is a devastating illegal invasion and a humanitarian catastrophe, which share the same roots with the climate crisis. And I would like to name them loudly, sound and loud. It's the fossil fuels. And
let me pause you there, because so much of what we are hearing through media, it's certainly in the Western context, this is an unjust war, this is an illegal war, this is a land grab, but the rationale for it, we've not been told a story of how this connects to fossil fuels very much at all. We've been told a story that this is about NATO expansion and Vladimir Putin's delusion of restoring the Russian Empire and many other reasons, which may be in part true, but can you draw that connection to us? You called it a fossil fuel war. You called this Putin's oil war. What's the connection between the climate crisis, fossil fuels, and what your nation's going through right now?
Yeah, thanks, Baratunde. That's an essential question to speak about for us where we are now. And the connections between those are very explicit, and Russian propaganda will never tell us or tell others the truth about how for decades the big Western oil companies courted Putin and helped him exploit Russia's vast reserves. And supported by many banks in Western countries, they have poured billions into Putin's war chest and turned a blind eye to his violent expansion to obtain access to even more fossil fuel reserves. And saying so, I just want to say that financial institutions can't claim to be taking a moral stance by exiting Russian securities when they've been almost forced to do so. All of these oil companies and investors aided and abetted Putin's rise to power with decades of financing Russian fossil fuels, which has resulted in the shocking invasion of my country, of Ukraine. And actually, the last point I would be making in this regard is the sentiment has turned, and it won't stop at Russian assets only. It's not that time. It's time when we are making a history, and the history demands nothing less. The energy system is global, and it's the fossil fuels that are toxic. As long as we're addicted to fossil fuels, we'll continue to empower regimes that oppress the citizens, initiate deadly conflicts, and pollute and deprive local communities. And as Ukrainians, we are remaking our history in these tragic but also remarkable days through brave acts of resistance and mutual support. And the world can see every day the heroic actions of ordinary people who are fighting for their communities, for our families in our country. And we are committed to the defense of the vulnerable and the cause of justice, how the world is to be committed about the climate crisis and the most vulnerable who are suffering the most in their communities. And there was a powerful testimony of our indigenous leaders today, earlier today, just to make the point that this is our natural resources, this is our lands, and we decide that these resources should have stay in the ground, and we should non-proliferate. We should proliferate from fossil fuels once and forever. And actually, saying so, I just wanted to remind us one of mind-capturing moments from the Don't Look Up movie, which captured my attention especially. It's the launch of these big aircrafts. I don't want to say that they're like rockets or something, aircrafts to destroy the comet for the first time. And what an obscure irony is in these big shots of the happy faces with the great hope that another destruction will do a good deed, save humanity from imminent death. This won't happen. Another destruction won't bring us peace, and we should start to learn and have a willpower of ending fossil fuels one and forever.
And another act of destruction will not bring world peace. Maybe acts of creation will. And I think one of the things that I've been so moved by is the creativity of the Ukrainian people in the face of such overt destruction. The maintenance of humor, the solidarity, the storytelling, the outreach, even the phone line that you all set up for the mothers and the wives and the family members of Russians, showing compassion to the enemy more so than their own governments show to them as they send their boys off to murder and to die in turn. It's not a question, Svetlana. I think it's an acknowledgement that even, as we face so much destructive power, and as your nation faces it directly head on, the power of creativity to help us move through that and try to build a better world in so many different dimensions. So on behalf of anyone else who doesn't have the opportunity to speak to you right now, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for admitting that, because we are all humans and we have sense of humor. And even in the grimmest and darkest times and the most dear times, we are humans who wants some better world to be possible and happen. And that's why in the long term, we try to continue to fight to end of the age of fossil fuels that feed both the war and climate crisis. And Wall Street, especially, because I'm speaking to US audience right now, please just pay attention that Wall Street and the banks must go further and stop the ongoing funding of fossil fuels everywhere, because they are the bulwark of autocracy and the death of the natural world. So
I need to say that again, Svetlana. You got to. Fossil fuels are the bulwarks of autocracy and
the death of the natural world.
And the death of the natural world. Put that on a bumper sticker and put it on your bicycle or electric vehicle.
And it's actually a quote from our op-ed with Bill McKibben, who is here today with us. And yes, that's why it's probably worth of definitely capturing and putting on your bumper and just pushing it somewhere in social media, of course. Yeah.
You're doing my job for me, Svetlana. I want to, so the people at home, welcome my co-host now, Svetlana Romanco, who perfectly teed up our next guest, who's going to roll in just a moment, Bill McKibben. As Bill comes on screen, Svetlana, I'd love to refer to the climate crisis and this moment of possibility and opportunity. The two of you combined forces and formed a Voltron of intelligent argument for how we could use this moment to bring about peace and ensure the possibility of peace for our future. The Ukraine war is a decision point. Banks should stop funding the fossil fuel industry forever. You penned this in the Los Angeles Times. We are joined by Bill McKibben, who almost needs no introduction. I know Bill from 350.org, his 1989 book, The End of Nature, regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change. Bill, welcome to our screen. Could you please share why you wrote an op-ed with Svetlana Romanco, an environmental lawyer and activist here from Ukraine?
Well, first of all, Baratunde, what a great pleasure to be here today and to be here with so many old friends who've been working so hard for so long. Melina and Mark and Svetlana and I have been colleagues for a long time. We wrote this piece for the LA Times because sometimes people don't quite make the connection back to the banks that are behind all this because it seems a little bit removed. But think about it for a little while. These are the same banks that have been funding Vladimir Putin and his war machine for decades now, long after it was entirely clear what he was about. Remember, this is not the first time that Putin has invaded Ukraine. He took Crimea in 2014. Did that slow them down? No. No more than it slowed them down from funding Exxon and Chevron and everybody else long after it became clear what was happening to the climate. We should be incredibly grateful to Svetlana. I mean, think of the courage to be able to sit in Ukraine right now and think about anything else other than the bombs falling around your head. But we have no choice but to think about everything at once because it's all happening at once. Right now, while we're pulling bodies out of Mariupol and the theater there in a scene of extraordinary horror, at the same day, the scientists told us last night that the temperature in the Antarctic yesterday was 70 degrees above normal, not 7 degrees above normal, not 20 degrees above normal, 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, the largest single deviation from normal that we've ever seen in a temperature record any place on Earth in our years of keeping those records. So the Earth is on fire for many reasons, but one cause. And that cause is the endless effort of the fossil fuel industry to keep its business model going long past the point when we have many other ways to power our lives. Think about what it would be like if we were running Europe on sun and wind right now. Vladimir Putin can't embargo the sun. He can't, put up some wall to keep the wind
listen,
from
Bill,
blowing.
I gotta pause you there. You said Vladimir Putin won't embargo the sun. I've seen The Simpsons, what Mr. Burns did to block the sun from the people of Springfield. I'm sure that was inspirational to a Bond villain like Vladimir Putin. So never underestimate his deviousness. But thank you for expanding the realm of possibility of how we can get cleaner, get greener, and be healthier together. Svetlana, while you're still here, I wanted to know what you want to see in terms of what's happening in Ukraine and this connection to climate, maybe what you already were seeing even before this terrible war was visited upon you.
Yeah, and first of all, of course, I would like and I wish to see this war ended, but not just ended, then we overcome it, but we win it as the Ukrainians and within the global solidarity that we are powerfully holding right now. And this is like 3D modeling of a climate crisis. Unfortunately, I never thought that we will pay such a price to see it, how the crisis may look like with the war in Ukraine, because the same thing, refugees and deaths and killings and invaders, the same thing is, and no access to basic human rights and to natural resources. This all will, we have to revisit until we won't shift ourselves towards a clean and renewable energy for the first and foremost. We need to move faster to protect people via secure, stable, and sovereign renewable energy, which will be distributed. No another monopoly we would like to see arising on this crash leftovers of Putin's not successful empire. We have the solutions. We now have the willpower. We can and must move faster because the sooner we replace oil, gas, and coal with cheap, safe, and renewable energy, the sooner we can all live in peace. That's simple. Let's just follow that. And for doing that, I would also like us to make a call on everyone who is watching, everyone who will be watching, and everyone who cares. Just please to stand in solidarity with Ukraine and take action in support of peace Spread the word to your friends, your families, your leaders, and your bankers. It's time to end this era of blood oil and create a new era of clean energy and fossil fuel non-proliferation. For doing that, you can follow and sign in the vast petition Stand With Ukraine, which we are delivering to political leaders. You can go to website withukraine.org and sign as an organization to follow us and to help us. I mean, in Ukraine, Ukrainian climate activists who were united for this climate action and anti-war action, to stop Putin immediately, to end the war, and to enable fast and just transition to renewable energy.
Svetlana Romanco, thank you so much for holding all of that together. Thank you for standing so strongly. I want to repeat that website. It is avaz.org, avaz.org/stand with Ukraine. Please sign that and encourage us all to stop fueling Putin's fossil fuel war, as Svetlana so aptly put it. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to continuing to stand with you and appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Meanwhile, Bill, you stay right there. We're going to be joined very, very soon by Adam McKay. We're going to be joined by Meryl Streep. I want to keep talking with you, Bill, about other things that we can do to take this moment and accelerate and create a more regenerative path, a healthier path with the clean air and the clean water, and not so much monopolistic and destructive ways to power our lives. So, Bill, what else can we do?
Well, look, right now, I mean, all of our efforts, obviously, all of our thinking is focused on what's happening in Ukraine. And there are lots of ways for Americans to help make that go better. Vladimir Putin not only funded his army with the proceeds from oil and gas, that's 60% of his export earnings. So absent that, he's got nothing. And you can tell that. Look around your house and try to find something Russian to boycott. Unless you've got an old bottle of Stolichnaya in the back of the liquor cabinet, there's not much, because Russia doesn't do much except pump oil and gas, okay? So the other problem, though, is that they've been able to make Europe cower because they keep threatening to turn off the gas. As long as he has that power, he's going to be abusing it. The way to get off that power is not to drill more oil and gas and help whatever other despot we can find. You know, the Boris Johnson was off in Saudi Arabia yesterday on the same day that they executed 81 more people, beheaded 81 more people looking for more oil and gas. That's not the way to do this. The way to do this is to seize the moment to get onto clean energy. We can help in particular right now in Europe by building out all the kinds of things they need to make that happen. Maybe you're even I am not quite old enough to remember the years before World War II, but before we entered the war, before Pearl Harbor, we had something called Lend-Lease, where we were sending huge amounts of materiel and support to keep the British going in the face of Hitler. The thing that they need right now in Europe, in Ukraine, they need anti-tank weapons, but in Europe, they need air source heat pumps. They need insulation. They need the newest technology in order to heat people's homes that doesn't require gas to do it. We've started this little program, little campaign called Heat Pumps for Peace and Freedom, because as people at the Department of Energy and elsewhere are pointing out, we've got lots of spare capacity to manufacture this stuff in the States. And it's easy to install. We can get it over there. I mean, look, it's starting to get warmer now in Europe. And so for a few months, Putin's power is lessened a little bit. But even in a globally warmed world, it's going to get colder next October. And by then, we need to have made a significant dent in what it is that they're able to, leverage they're able to exert.
I've watched all these World War II movies, and you see Churchill, and you see U.S. leaders, and you see generals, and it's, you know, we're going to fight them in all these different places. One of the places we can fight isn't just, you know, land and sea and air, but with our energy sources. It feels like this Marshall Plan, like this green Marshall Plan. Is that part of the idea, kind of to use this moment to accelerate Europe's freedom from this kind of
Right.
dependency? Yeah.
Right. You know, Svetlana said something important. We're at a decision point. You know, our world obviously moves slowly. Our political system is designed to be dysfunctional at this point and to move with extraordinary molasses-like slowness. But every once in a while, events come along that cause us to have to change and change quickly. And we've seen in the last few weeks, people really rising up to support in ways we wouldn't have thought possible, even the people in Ukraine. And a big dimension of that is seizing this opportunity. I wrote a long piece that came out in the New Yorker yesterday, all about the fact that we're now, you know, scientists have cut the cost of clean energy 90% in the last decade. So we're poised for this moment. If we wanted to seize it, there's not a technological or a financial obstacle in the way. What's in the way is inertia and toxic vested interest.
But
and
what
that's
about,
what we're talking about when we talk about banks and oil companies.
But what about, so everything you're saying, you're actually getting me legitimately excited and jazzed up. But you said there's nothing standing in our way except these things. I didn't hear you say Joe Manchin. You know,
Well,
like what's everything good that everything good that I ever wanted for my country. There's a senator from West Virginia standing in the way because his vision of his
Joe Manchin is
he's
the absolute definition, Baratunde, of vested interest. Joe Manchin has taken more money from the fossil fuel industry than anyone else in Washington. Not an easy contest to win, okay? But he's won it. And man, the return on their investment has been unbelievable. For the few $100,000 that they stuffed in his pocket, they've been able to ward off hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in clean energy, the thing that they fear the most. They know that we now have better ways than oil and gas of doing the things we need to do in their lives. And they're terrified that we're going to do them at the speed that we could. That's our job as movements, is to push. And one of the places to push is on banks. That's why this work around C&B is so important. And it's why at Third Act, we're organizing older people like me, to pledge to take their money out of Citi and Chase and Wells Fargo and B of A by the end of the year if they haven't stopped funding the fossil fuel industry.
So
the banks are there. That's the money pipeline that drives the oil pipelines.
I was chuckling, not at you, but because I have too much happening on my screen, and we have our green room, and Mark Ruffalo still around, and he held up an unflattering statement toward the senator from West Virginia that just got me right in the heart area. What can Joe Biden do to convince Manchin to go along with some plan to get heat pumps to Europeans? How is he actually how can the president move forward on this, given what we've seen?
In this particular case of heat pumps or insulation or whatever off to Europe, you don't have to wait for Joe Manchin. Biden has a law called the Defense Production Act, passed in the Korean War era, and it's been used by everybody. Both Trump and Biden used it to speed up vaccine production. In truth, Biden also used it because during the California wildfires last year, we ran out of fire hose. So he used the Defense Production Act to get a factory in Oklahoma working overtime to build miles of new fire hose. In this case, he could use it to set up the contracts to build all these small machines and get them over to Europe, hopefully with a bunch of Americans to help install them, who would come back knowing how to do that work here too, because it's not like we don't just need to do it in Europe. You know, yes, it's a very good idea to do it in Moldova, and it'd be a really good idea to do it in Minnesota. And they don't call it global warming for nothing, you know?
Yo, with the snaps. All right, Bill's feisty today. I hope y'all are taking notes. Here's another hopefully tough one for you. We're in this midst of a war. It has global implications for the price of energy. Gas prices are going through the roof. You know, we thought we could achieve energy independence by having our own, oil reserves, our own oil drilling, our own processing. And it turns out when Russia's supply is constricted through sanctions or other means, the price goes up everywhere. So I'm hearing folks say, Americans don't want to pay more for fuel and gas, especially if it's poor Americans who have to drive to work and they're not choosing any of this environmental circumstance that they're in. Is the answer not to, in the short term, get more oil flowing, open up more of these permits, get the pipelines pumping, go cozy up to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, anybody else we said we didn't like temporarily, in order to limit the economic pain here at home. What do you say?
No, you answered the question yourself, Baratunde. It's a global commodity. So it's the price is set globally. And as long as any of us are depending on it, it gives power to the people who produce it. Putin's making a fortune because the price of oil has gone up. Anything he's able to sell, he's selling at a huge inflated price, you know? So the real task, for the short run, is, and I think Americans are completely willing to do this, to deal with the price of gasoline and to drive less and to figure out how to combine trips and to do all the kind. Everybody I talk to, I live in rural America, everybody I talk to is like, this is the least we can do. People are dying in the Ukraine, so I'm not going to whine about high gas prices. But in the very, looking longer than a few weeks at a time, what we clearly have to do is pass those kind of things like the Build Back Better bill that allow us to build out electric vehicles, in this case, to bikes, buses, and cars. Look, someone tell cable news the price of sunlight didn't change at all over the last month. The sun is delivering energy for just the same price it did in January, and it'll be delivering energy for just the same price, if anything, cheaper, because we're getting better at using it, next January. This is the way to go. We've got to go there, and now we have two good reasons: the destruction of the planet and the threat at this point, for the first time in our adult lives, of an actual nuclear war caused by a madman who's powered by oil and gas. So, if this isn't enough to make us move, then I think we're going to be, entitled to despair. But I think it is going to be enough. I think this is a moment, if we all push, that we may get somewhere.
Can you also briefly explain, this big oil windfall profits tax that's been proposed? Because sometimes these companies will jack up their prices in anticipation of changing market conditions, but just take the difference between their cost and what they're passing on to consumers as increased profit. What can we do about that?
So it's not like it got any more expensive for Exxon to go pump oil in the last month. It cost them the same to do it. They're just making a whole ton of money because Vladimir Putin started a war and the price of oil went up. That's the definition of a windfall profit. And we should be taking it away from them right now and returning it to people who are having to pay too much and you can tell that it's a windfall profit because these companies have been making record profits and engaging in record stock buybacks. They're just greed balls. There's nothing more to it. And so good on Senator Whitehouse and Representative Khanna and others who are coming out with this windfall profit tax.
We've got Adam McKay joining us in a moment from Don't Look Up. But before he comes on screen, I want to ask you, what did you think of this movie? And in particular, what have you been thinking about creating an IRL Just Look Up alliance?
Well, first of all, the movie was great, not just because it was a wonderful allegory about climate change, but because it was actually just like a funny movie, and a funny movie that wasn't all, jokes about bodily functions and stuff. My favorite moment of all was Tyler Perry interviewing the climate scientists and asking them if there were actually aliens out on riding the asteroids and stuff. I mean, so I laughed a good deal. But I do think that the response to the movie demonstrates that there are millions upon millions upon millions of people who understand at some visceral level the moment that we're in, who share the fear and who want to do something about it, something beyond watch a great film. That's why things like this Just Look Up alliance make a lot of sense. Start harnessing that energy and harnessing it not for changing your light bulb or whatever it is. We're past the point where you can make the math of climate change work one vegan dinner at a time, one Tesla at a time. The most important thing an individual can do is be less of an individual and join together with others in movements large enough to make basic political and economic change. And that's, I think, the work that Adam and others have got us started on here. And so it's a good idea to jump on the bus that they piloted into the middle of all this, the electric bus, and make real progress now fast together.
Make real progress now, fast and together. And get on that hashtag if you're watching this right now. Hashtag just look up. Check it out on social media. Contribute to it. Put some of these hot quotes, some of this Bill McKibben classic shade. Put that out there on your channels. Bill, thank you so much. We're going to be joined by Adam in a moment. We're going to go to a video clip first. And when we return, Adam McKay is going to hop in the building.
Is it worth it? No! Is it worth it?
No!
How good a school does your kid need to go to? How nice does your car need to be? Is it worth it?
Okay, we're trying to troubleshoot. Thank you, Adam, for setting us up. Jesse is in touch with Meryl, trying to give her logistical instructions. But great job, everybody. It's incredible. Amazing work, and amazing work to the production team. Thank you, Bill. That was very powerful.
That's the question we ask you. At what point does human decency
I'm so amazed by you all. You're all on fire. This is going incredible. I'm getting messages from everywhere. My family is writing and saying you're all amazing. So I just want to say you're all amazing.
And Baratunde, feel free at some point, if it's not happening, just to say, you know, Meryl just accepted the panelist pop-up that you're getting, because she's probably, maybe she's a little confused by the technology. I get confused by it.
You get your bonus. I ask you. Is it worth it? No! Is it worth it?
No! That you're here with us now.
We have to look at the hard scientific data.
Start
Right
video
now,
on
you
the
will
bottom
hear
left,
this on the news.
and then unmute yourself with the mute button right next to
Climate
it.
scientists disagree with the fact that we are causing man-made
And
climate warming.
Mark, nice job
And
for
this is
the
the clock. We all should be looking at all of our
I almost lost my
at this
shit. I
clock.
was like, is that on TV? Oh no, that's just a
All of
great.
our frequencies
Welcome, Meryl.
are
Thank
in
you
this
so
clock.
much for coming.
422 parts per
And just to
million.
let you know, your video
Greenhouse
and
gases.
your audio is muted.
This is it. We need to
You could stay
focus
muted.
instead.
Meryl, can we just get a quick audio check? Could you press video?
Titillating distractions
Okay.
and
Never.
clicks and likes, and it needs to be all about this. Thank you all for coming here today. I appreciate it. Solidarity.
And we're back. What's up? I'm Baratunde Thurston, writer, activist, comedian, host of the podcast, How to Citizen. We're making citizen a verb, and we're citizening very hard right now. I've just been speaking with climate champion. I've given him a new title, Bill McKibben, and we're about to be joined by another champion. You may know the writer, director, Adam McKay, from some of his classic hits. I'm talking Step Brothers, Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, or some of his more serious political fare like Vice and The Big Short, or for his latest, one of the most streamed pieces of content in the history of streaming content, AKA the world, Don't Look Up. Adam, you're in the building. What's up?
Thank you for having me. What a great group of people. What an amazing discussion. Obviously about the story, the threat, the biggest threat to human life in human history. And we're living through it. And sometimes it's very strange to live in this culture and have everyone just go toodaloo, everything's fine. And we know there is a looming shadow over human life. So to join this group and to hear you guys talk and to hear the chief, which was really inspiring, Bill, who's someone I've admired for a long time, this means a lot.
Well, it means a lot that you helped bring forth something that we needed to hear to people who may not have been in a position to hear it through other means. So on behalf of all humans, which I am now licensed myself to speak for, thank you for your work. Can you just explain to us, what inspired you to make Don't Look Up in the first place?
Yeah, I had a bit of a turning point in my life, which I think is the turning point we want a lot of people to have, where I went from the somewhat concerned crowd, where I thought it was 50 to 80 to 100 years away that we were going to see these devastating effects of the climate crisis. And I was worried, I was involved. And the deeper, the more I went into it, the more I started realizing the time frame was changing. And in fairness to the scientists, they always told us, we know that the planet is heating.
Yeah.
We know how it's heating, but the effects are so complicated. We don't know what that will do to the time frame. And I saw that time frame tightening and tightening. So it was the IPCC report from about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was David Wallace Wells's book, Uninhabitable Earth.
Oh, terrible, terrible book. I mean, and when I mean terrible, I mean, it's quality writing.
Incredible.
It's terrifying book.
You have to read it. If you haven't read it. And I had 3 nights where I couldn't sleep. And my wife was like, what's going on? And I went and I checked with, social media is, for the most part, a hellscape. But there are some good things with it, which is where you can talk to a Bill McKibben, a Catherine Hayhoe, you can talk to Alex Steffen, you can talk to these amazing people who really know about this. And I started asking them, am I missing something? It seems like this is now. And all the responses I got were, no, this is now. And then the final thing was my sister, my wife's brother, but also my sister up in Oregon had to evacuate her house from the fires. The smoke was so intense. It was like being in Chernobyl. It was a 550 AQI, and there were areas up there that were 800 AQI. And then during COVID, I couldn't go in my backyard. And I went to full red alarm. I just kept checking the data. I kept checking the science. And I'm not the greatest mathematician or scientist, but it was so clear. And I was like, all right, I mean, I'm a movie maker, so I got to make a movie about this weird gaslight culture that we're living in that tells us that everything is fine because they can sell more advertising time because of it. And I was really lucky in that there were a bunch of other people that were feeling the same way. Leonardo Dicaprio, the great Meryl Streep, who I think is listening into us.
Meryl's always listening. That's just
always listening.
Yeah, she's always listening.
And Jennifer Lawrence and Jonah Hill and all these people, Tyler Perry, Rob Morgan, all were feeling the same thing. So we made this big, crazy movie for the world, and the response was amazing. It was the #1 Netflix movie in Pakistan, Nigeria, Vietnam, Brazil, America, Canada. So it was terrifying yet heartening, the response to the movie.
The heartening part, I want to focus on that. Sometimes, we talk about art imitating life or life imitating art, or sometimes it becomes this Mobius strip in which we can't determine the beginning, middle, or end of something because it's just continuous existence. But something that occurred in your film, it's titled Don't Look Up, and there's this movement within the movie, this fictional universe of, just look up, like just accept facts. And in real life, we have the emergence of a Just Look Up alliance. Bill, this is something that you have been pushing for, hoping for, I think. I mean, science communication has been in need of boosts continuously. How did you feel about seeing Just Look Up, and talk to us about this extraction, this transition, probably not the best to use the word extraction, but this transition from the fictional world to the real world of a movement called Just Look Up?
Well, it's a completely fascinating moment, of course. And when a new cultural, when something comes along that shakes the culture, that has more valence than people understand, because the biggest job here, the thing that's most important, is this shift in the zeitgeist, the shift of what people's sense of what's normal and natural and obvious. And Adam and his crew have already done an enormous amount to do that. But now you don't want to waste the energy. We've talked a lot about energy today in many different forms,
No,
but this is the most precious kind of energy.
Efficient use of it, yeah.
The most precious kind of energy is human attention, human engagement, human solidarity. And we don't want to waste any of that. So it's really important to have some vehicles like this Just Look Up Alliance of, people whose hearts were cracked open some by watching this. So yeah, it's one more part of this great spreading movement, the Rebel Alliance, that's now in a full-on fight with the most powerful forces in the world, the big oil companies and the big banks. We do not know how this fight's going to come out, but we know that this, the kind of work that Andrew Slack and Avaz and people are doing to try and take this hashtag and make it into an ongoing thing. Yeah. That's an important part of this work. Movements, the only way for those of us who aren't zillionaires to stand up to the power of oligarchs of all kinds, the oligarchs running Russia, but the oligarchs running Citibank and the oligarchs running Exxon, the only way to stand up to them is to band together. The technology we've got is nonviolent social movement building, and the kind of work that Adam's done is a big part of making that real and making that happen.
Yo, so I was shuffling around a little bit because you said Rebel Alliance, and I just had to show this off. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Rebel Alliance for real, and we're not just talking in theory here. So hashtag Just Look Up. Please engage with the hashtag, add your thoughts, share quotes that are resonating with you, or just check out what other people are sharing and amplify those. But there are also 2 new social accounts. On Twitter, it's Look Up Alliance, and on Instagram, it is Just Look Up Alliance. Now, Adam, we recently saw 80,000 or so climate activists in cities all over Europe with signs and banners that said, "Look up." How did that feel to witness that?
Yeah, I mean, we made this movie to be a cultural reference for the climate movement. So we've said from the beginning, and Meryl, I see, has joined us, and we talked about this. Although Meryl, if you figured out how to unmute, I love giving Meryl a hard time for her technological
What are you doing? What are you doing? Not on my watch. Not on my watch. Meryl, welcome. And I would never insult you like that in front of the whole world.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you. All right, good.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, it's not insulting. It's just the truth. And the truth will set me free eventually. But no, I just found this whole discussion really, really interesting. And I wish everybody in the world were hearing it, because it's just, it's inspiring. But people who are deep into the movement have to realize that other people are coming in at the point where they are, which is nowhere. And so it bears retelling the story over and over and over again. What Adam did with Don't Look Up is something unusual, because he told a story that maybe people were not familiar with, or they were exhausted with. There are 2 camps, either you're exhausted with this subject or you don't know very much about it. And he sort of pulled it together, because laughter is a great way to enter the consciousness. But I do think that you can't underestimate the ignorance of people like myself, who don't have a social media presence, who don't even understand how the fucking thing works. But it's just important in talking about confronting the corporations and in the banks. We always think of these things as impenetrable castles, and really they're just people. They're just mostly fathers, grandfathers, brothers, and uncles, and they have families. So I'm just thinking, if were a way for the outreach to go to their families, to their wives, to their mothers, to their children, the grandmothers, and to reach around you know, my mother always said, you don't win an argument with a man by proving him wrong, but there are other ways to get in and to say, you have a stake in this. And it might be just through the families. So if we put names to these corporations, these corporate boards, a lot of the same guys are sitting on the same boards. And if we can reach their families in not, you know, a damning confrontative way, but a way that says, you can be on board with this and we need you. You are responsible. You're reaping the rewards. You have the benefits. Now, you know, look around and see. Don't be blind. Look up. Just look up and just speak up.
And there's a way to, I mean, I think that's a beautiful, humane invitation to change. No one wants to be a villain in their own story. So how do we allow people to be heroes, to help us all look up, to help us all move forward with quality and dignified, you know, life? I'm going to come back to you in a second, Meryl, because I want to understand your climate awakening and the way that Adam shared with us. But Adam, I have a specific point to pick with you about the movie, and I haven't had a chance to talk with you. So this is just me. But the Look Up crowd lost, bro. Like, come on, man. In a typical American movie, you know, the good people come out on top in the end. In this atypical movie, we got really attached to these good people, and they didn't make it, even though they looked up. So what do you, I mean, you're here. Are you dooming us? Like, what's going on with you and Look Up?
Well, I mean, one of the big reasons we were excited, and one of the big reasons we got these great actors like Meryl and Leo and Jan and Tyler was that, you know, there's a lot of power to story where we've learned a lot of, we've seen the negative effects of story. We've seen what advertising and misinformation can do to the human view. We've seen the individualistic Ayn Randian sort of narrative push that really ripped our country apart, the US. And as we've learned from great writers like Jane Mayer with Dark Money, or Kim Phillips Fain with Invisible Hands, that wasn't by accident. That was, you know, that Adam Curtis, the documentarian, that narratives have a lot of power for us. And so in addition to making the movie a comedy, because we all discussed it, that when you can laugh, that means you have perspective. You know, you see in the darkest times in history, people have this gallows sense of humor, and that means they're still in it. But the second thing with this movie was, you know, this idea that in America or even worldwide, we've become audience members, we've become passive consumers. And we have to remember that unless we step up and get active, there is no happy ending guaranteed. And that was one of the reasons we ended the movie the way we did. The other reason we ended the movie the way we did was because there's so much BS. I mean, we are chest deep in BS. I mean, whether it's billboards, commercials, everything is a sales pitch. And I love what happened with the characters, including Meryl's character, the president, who was the living embodiment of BS. But even by the end, you even saw her kind of wake up. And everyone kind of becomes real in the ending because all the BS kind of drifts away. And this is the climate movement. The climate crisis is happening. The science is clear. There are 0% of climate scientists that are debating this. And ultimately, reality always wins. But there's also a beauty to that, even though it's horrible. And I think that's kind of what we went for with the ending, was all the BS faded away. And it was family, and it was friends, and it was breaking bread, and it was Meryl's character being eaten by a brontosaurus. And those are the truths we want to see.
I mean, I feel like there's something going on with you and Meryl. Like, you're so excited about her demise. You're giving her shade about her Zoom skills. Like, y'all might need some kind of counseling session or something.
I love Meryl, unabashedly.
That would be so helpful for me.
Yeah, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Adam, we can have words later. We heard from Adam earlier, a few minutes ago, about how he came to really censor the climate crisis and opportunity in his life. It was personal, it was family in Oregon, it was air quality indices well beyond anything reasonable that any smartphone should be able to display or any lung should be able to withstand. Meryl, what has been your awakening to the climate crisis, and how does this movie, if at all, play a role in that?
It just ran down the hall. It just almost broke into the room. That's my granddaughter. So I got involved with it was really when I started having children, which is like 100 years ago, 43 years ago, that I got involved with the environmental movement, because the world changes when you move out of your little solipsistic, self-interest as a single person, and start to care about the long-term effects of every act that you have. And so I got involved with it came to me through about the pesticides on fruit and vegetables, and there was a report that came out then in the late 80s about the residual effects of this. And so I got involved early on with that, and I've followed the climate crisis, because all these things are tied together. It's just like the body, your head and your feet and your gut, and everything is part of the same organism, and one affects the other. So I've always been aware of it, but not really out front, because life takes over. You sort of have kids and you have grandchildren, and your concerns are, I have a career, thanks to Adam, who has no sense, and cast me. But I have been involved tangentially with lots of issues of human justice and women's equality and racial justice and all these things, because they're all the same thing. The fossil fuel hegemony over the earth, and how we're all held in this vice, and it has to do with why there's huge disparity in wealth around the world. It all leads to the same sort of villainous cabal. And if we can just penetrate that, and we're seeing the results of it in Ukraine right now. We have to break free of this vice that we're all living in, and everything flows from that. All questions of justice, all questions of everything in the world flow from follow the money.
You have been flowing with us right now. If you're just tuning in, that's Meryl Streep. We just here, just hanging out. You're just hanging out on the live stream, just kicking like I do. It's my regular Saturday, but for anybody else for whom this is not normal, we're just kicking it with Meryl Streep, Adam McKay. Bill McKibben has been with us, and Bill, I want to thank you for everything you have done, everything you are doing, everything you're about to do, particularly with this heat pumps for Ukraine, for heat pumps for peace and freedom. This promotion of that our president can actually do something without Joe Manchin to help the people of Ukraine, to help the people of Europe, to help the people of Earth and all life on Earth really withstand what is certainly coming, but doesn't have to be as hard as it is. So thank you so much, Bill, for joining us. I've been holding you hostage in this little Brady Bunch thing. I release you from your Zoom bondage, and we'll be following up with you as everyone else should. Let's
on we go.
Yeah. Meryl and Adam, I want to talk to you all about the actions you've been taking in terms of City National Bank, subsidiary of the Royal Bank of Canada. Adam, can you talk about what you've been working on with Mark and others to support the Wet'suwet'en people? Have you been moving your money yourself? Are you talking to your colleagues about moving their money? Where are things?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The micro is the macro is the micro is the macro. And you look at this story about what's going on in Canada and these big banks financing these horrific fossil fuel projects right in the face of overwhelming evidence. I mean, we're already losing. This is something that people don't talk about. This study was just published in The Lancet, We're already losing 5 million people a year to heat changes. That's already, we're already there. I mean, we're looking at an event that will create migrations, uninhabitable zones across the planet, potentially billions of deaths. Some argue an extinction level event for mammals above the size of a possum. And yet these banks just keep churning along. And you look at what this bank is doing up in Canada, and yes, they own City National Bank, which I bank with. And so I'm being very clear. I will stop banking with City National Bank if this continues. You're having your moment. You're being called out. This is unacceptable. We are talking about, like Meryl said, our kids, our neighbors, our friends. We're talking about human life. We're talking about the life of these beautiful animals, the ocean on the planet. Unacceptable. And I think the other big thing we have to be aware of is who we're talking to. And Meryl talked about this a little bit. We're talking to boardrooms. We're talking to, people talk about AI. AI is already here. And AI is the corporate charter. That is what AI is, because it gets human beings to act not like human beings. Yeah. It gets human beings to kill each other, to turn each other into statistics. And we need to be very clear. I am accusing City National Bank, I'm accusing the Royal National Bank of Canada of corporate malfeasance, of fiduciary failure of their job. And I said this yesterday, I'll say it again. You think the scarlet letter that the Sackler family wears is big? Wait till you see the size of the letter you're gonna wear. Wait till the other CEOs, the corporate boards of these oil companies, our Congress, who is asleep at the wheel, the mayors across this country, the governors, wait till you see the scarlet letter you wear, because we are watching, we are aware, and you are failing.
Okay, so that sounded like some threats and some facts, and I want to bring a superhero back on the screen who has the power to morph into something big and green and powerful, which is what we need right now. Mark Ruffalo, get back up in here. How do you respond to this level of assertiveness from Adam here in terms of the fire and the fury, the love and the passion with which he is joining this No Dirty Banks, No More Dirty Banks movement?
You're muted, Mark.
Oh, it's a classic moment. You're on mute. Yes. That is the hashtag of our time. Yes.
Me and Meryl.
All right, go restart what you were saying.
First of all, I just want to say how happy I am that Meryl is here and I'm here with Adam. It's so meaningful to be here with my entertainment family. He's right. The one thing that the banks do understand now is this issue. They have risk committees that look over this, that see all the science, that know every dimension and every nook and cranny of this. They've been using the 2050 divestment as a kind of greenwashing, while front-loading fossil fuels and extraction and pipelines and infrastructure up until that point. I mean, they're dumping everything into it. And so, we're talking about people who only speak, what the language they're speaking is money. And the language they're speaking is liability. And we have to, we've tried so hard to speak to them about morality, about reason, about loss, about, indigenous rights. We've tried to take that approach. The science, everything, we've tried to take that approach, and it's just not, it's just not getting through. And so we have to talk money now, because that is the language they speak. They talk money, they talk liability, and so how do we get through to them? It's our money. We are funding this collectively. I mean, the moment we're living in now, the pandemic, the Ukrainian war, climate change, it's all telling us the message, the overarching message is, this is us. We are in this together. We have a responsibility to each other. And we are part of the problem. And our money is funding this. And we have to say no to that. For the banks to understand, to take action. We have to say, we're going to sue you for malfeasance, for them to say, oh, this is risky business, we have to stop. We have to go to where this stuff is starting. The banks, they control policy, they control legislation, they make or break an industry. And we have to turn our attention to them now. And they know, Dave McKay knows. Meryl's right. Dave McKay can be the hero here. He's planted himself as the hero. He talks about climate change. He talks about Indigenous rights, and he has to take it to the next step. He has to put his money where his mouth is, and he can be the hero. And I invite his wife and his children and his grandchildren, whoever knows him, to say, come on, Dad, Grandpa, hubby, do the right thing here. You have a chance to change the whole dynamic. One man can change the whole dynamic. If RBC decided to change the dynamic, every single bank in the world would follow them, because they would know that the whole world is behind them. The world is dying. The people of the world are dying for this to happen.
That's right.
So Meryl, I hear you chiming in. It's perfect, because I wanted to know, I saw you signed on to the No More Dirty Banks. And what happens when Meryl Streep calls the bank and says, I'm gonna move my money if you don't get right, with the future?
Yeah. Well, if only it were there, but it's not. I don't have any leverage, but you just think, Mark, yeah, it is money that moves a certain, it's money that moves the world. But it has to do with your worldview. What matters in the end? What matters in the end to people? What matters to a man who's powerful? His bank account matters a lot. How he's seen by his children and his grandchildren matters a lot. A book that meant a lot to me that I read this year is Speed and Scale, which is John Doerr's book, who's an early investor in Silicon Valley and a lot of big companies, tech companies. And his mind was changed, not by Al Gore's movie, but by the dinner after Al Gore's movie, where he sat around with a bunch of similarly placed men who were all there with their wives and kids. And they went around talking about, we don't know if this is definitely caused by human actions and blah, 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 to quote Greta. But they came to his daughter, who was then 15. And she said, I'm mad and I'm scared. And your generation did this and you better fix it. And that was in 2007. And he changed his life. He just upended it and took all of his analytic skills as an engineer, as an investment banker, and made connections with people around the world, and set out in this long-term study to figure out a course of action for people in the world to correct this. I'm not qualified to say it's doable, but it's made a big splash, and I think it's great. So one man's change of heart can come to him through his daughter, or it can come through his wallet, but which one really moves him? Which one really makes him change his life? I think it's from the people he loves. So that's my argument with you. Not an argument. We have to join forces. Yeah.
I think that's true. I to add to that, I unfortunately about 3-4 years ago had a heart attack. And I was lucky, it was fairly mild. But when you're having a heart attack, you don't know that it's mild. You're in the back of an ambulance, you're rushing to the hospital. And I would just say this to any CEO, board member, congressperson, anyone who's in a position to make decisions. You do not care about your stock price. You don't care about how much money is in your bank. You don't care about any of that junk when you stare at that, when you look at your own mortality. So I've always wondered with some of these people, the CEO of Exxon, the CEO of the Bank of Canada, like Dave McKay, you really think you're going to care about that in that moment? I call it kind of the dying breath strategy. And having been,
I call it the statin strategy.
Hey, listen, we
whoever's on statins, you know.
I want to give you all a chance. We have these youth climate activists coming up right after you, and I suspect, because I dragged you in here somewhat against your will, Mark, you might have to go the soonest. But starting with Mark, if you want, before you bounce, if you have anything to say to the next generation of activists and climate warriors, and what they're trying to do for all of us, as well as on behalf of the indigenous people whose land that we are trying to respect increasingly. Final words from you, Mark, on either of those topics, and we can let you go. And I'll ask the same of Adam.
No, my pleasure. Just building off of what the point Meryl's making. These kids, the kid did see Al Gore's movie, and she did hear the message that was coming out, and her vision, her moral center hasn't been affected by the things, by the bank account, by the things that cloud our judgment in these issues, right? And it was her speaking out after finding out the truth, the inconvenient truth. And so it is really there's many fronts we have to approach this issue on. And they right now are they have the moral clarity. They have the pure moral voice right now, and they have the power. And by the way, it's their world.
It's on their heads.
It is. This is what we're giving them, and the next 7 generations. Mm-hmm. And so the most we can do right now is listen to them, empower them, and take action on their behalf. It's the least we can do. We've all done so well, not all of us. No, a lot of us haven't done well by this system. Most people haven't done well by this system. They're bringing forward a new way of being, and we have to respect that and hold them up. And that's what I would say. And I love them for what they're doing.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mark.
Hear, hear.
Adam, do you want anything to tap in?
Yeah, there's a great speech, which I'm old enough to not remember firsthand, but to remember. And it was a young orator back in the 1960s named Mario Savio. And he was on the Berkeley campus. Mark knows it, Meryl knows it, a lot of you know it. And I would just say to the young activists, look it up. Because what you see in the tone of his voice, and it's a very passionate speech about the Vietnam War, about inequality, about racism. But what you see in his voice, and I don't always pull it off, is that he's strong, yet there's love, yet there's humor, yet there's creativity. There's anger, but it's a righteous anger. And all those things can coexist. And when you see it in this Mario Savio speech, it's one of the most beautiful speeches you'll ever see. I mean, it's to me, the MLK, I Have a Dream speech is right up there with that. And it's a flash of light that we need more of in the world today. So I would say to the young activists, you lead us, we will follow. We're here. The age of the individual is ending, and the age of the group is beginning. The age of community is beginning. So we're here for you.
And Meryl, I'll give you the last opportunity to share any words for our climate youth activists or just youth in general. Thank you.
I wish I were one of you. I wish I had 80 more years to work on this. God willing, we have 80 more years. but you're there, you're on the front lines. And I think, you know, just as an actor, I guess I just got so frustrated when all the superhero movies started happening. I don't know, I wasn't into them. And yet that is the vernacular of our time. And it made me think about the climate crisis too, because I think everybody has a superpower. I mean, I really understand that certainly Malala Yousafzai took something horrific that happened to her. And she was not anybody that you would think could move the world, but she did. And Greta Thunberg has done the same. Joan of Arc did it before her. I mean, we have these voices that you would think are powerless. You may think nobody knows me, but now we live in a world where every voice can be amplified. And so keep speaking up, keep looking up, and we depend on you.
Keep speaking up, keep looking up, except don't look at superhero movies with Mark Ruffalo in them. I noticed these subtle, I love this triangle of shade that we've had here. Mark, AKA Hulk, thank you so much. Adam, thank you so much. Meryl, thank you so much. It's been an honor. We
Me
will
too.
Look forward to seeing how this No More Dirty Banks campaign goes, but also how our using all the power we have to create the world we want to live in goes. And I want to thank each of you for being a part of that. Coming up in a few moments, we have youth climate activists who are going to have already picked up that baton that we saw passed just now to try to create the world much more worth living in. But in the meantime, I want to encourage you, check out the hashtag, Just Look Up. Find the new social accounts for the Look Up Alliance. We are Look Up Alliance or Just Look Up Alliance on Twitter and Instagram, respectively. I believe I might have just switched those around. And I want to share a few of the tweets that I've seen come in. Brandy Morin was quoting Mark Ruffalo, their indigenous people's relationship, their wisdom, their worldview is what we need to save the world and to save humanity. Thank you so much, Brandy, for paying attention and pulling out that particular nugget. Kim, somebody just is at Kim. How you get that? Blue check mark. That's how. John Dora was just name checked by Meryl Streep. High praise. That's right. Hashtag Just Look Up. Jill K says, you seemed in better spirits today than when you last spoke on this topic, Mark. Someone who's paying close attention to your spirits and very thoughtful conversation. Sean Boyle, Amy Gray says, Bill McKibben just killed it. There's so many more. So please jump in, amplify, find your way to use the power you have to move us all forward. Now, I've been teasing this last segment for a while. These youth climate activists are coming up. They are the metaphorical, well, the actual superheroes that the world needs right now. So bear with me as I introduce them all and we bring up the Brady Bunch squares again. We've got joining Hilda Flavia Nakabuye. We have Dominica Lasota. We have Sim Bilal, and we have Kaylin Cruz. Now, from indigenous nations to Ukraine, the people, they're rising up against the tyranny of big oil and gas, especially young folks. In 2018, inspired by the March for Our Lives protests by young folks in the US, a little Swedish girl stood in front of her parliament with the sign reading, "School strikes for climate." Within months, Greta Thunberg was joined by young people across the world striking from school each Friday. The climate strike movement is one of the most inspiring movements of our lifetimes. And with us today, we've got 3 of its leaders on 3 different continents. That's the kind of coalition, the global action it's going to take to make this globe worth inhabiting. So please welcome again, Sim Bilal and Kaylin Cruz of Youth Climate Strike LA, Dominica Lasota of Fridays for Future in Poland, and Hilda Flavia Nakabuye, founder of Fridays for Future Uganda. Welcome everybody. Hey, how y'all doing?
What's up, brother?
What's up?
Hi, everyone.
I mean, look,
Hi.
I was excited to share the screen with, you know, the Hulk and Adam McKay and Meryl Streep, but I'm not gonna lie, y'all really moved me even more. So
Thanks, bro.
submitted. Thank you for the work that you are all doing. We're gonna move through this with I'm gonna try to manage the traffic flow a little bit. So I want to start with Dominica and Hilda first. We were just talking with Adam about his feelings, his response to these 80,000 people showing up around the world in climate protests in France with holding up signs saying, look up, at the reality of the climate rally. I heard y'all were speakers. What was it like? You were supporting from where you were. What did you see where you are? Give me the view from Uganda first, from Poland. How's it going? How's it feeling?
Okay.
Hilda,
Hilda, do you want to go first about Paris?
Let's go with Hilda first from a Uganda perspective, and then we'll move to a Poland perspective. Hilda, how's it going?
Thank you so much, Baratunde. Well, I attended the climate march in Paris last Saturday, and it was very big. It was something that I've never seen before, because we cannot organize like that in Uganda, and such mobilization. Groups of people, over 80,000 people were in France marching for the climate. This was incredible. This is nothing I've ever seen before. The power, the energy of the people, it was so big. And that is when I believed that the power of the people is stronger than the people in power.
The power of the people is stronger than the people in power. That's beautiful. You're a poet as well, Hilda? That was just like rolled off really smoothly.
Not at all.
Dominica, can you tell us about your perspective on this action from where you're standing and sitting?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, with Hilda, we have been working on the Stop ECOP campaign to stop the longest pipeline in the world now being built by the Total Energy in Uganda and Tanzania for some time now. And I also plan to go to Paris to join Hilda. But I, on the other hand, was here in Poland and were so stopped by the fossil fuel war that is happening in Ukraine, and working on hosting refugees here in Warsaw in Poland, and also helping in the evacuations of our Ukrainian friends from Fridays for Future Ukraine. And to me, it's to me, it's so powerful, so hopeful to see the movement in France really like rising up to oppose what Total is doing and what injustice it is committing in Uganda and Tanzania and all over the world. But at the same time, I'm so outraged because we are facing yet again another senseless fossil fuel war in Ukraine. And I'm outraged that every single day around $800 million are still being paid into Putin's pocket by European countries for all fossil fuels, and driving this destruction forward. And here pushing 2 million refugees into to seek refuge in Poland. And it is they all claim that they stand up in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, but at the same time, all of those money flows still to Russia, to the oligarchs, to the companies there who drive the fossil fuel war machine that we are now seeing the destructive effects of. So I've been trying to source hope from my friends, from Hilda, from Arina and Elias, who are the Ukrainian activists that had to escape and go to Poland and to Germany. But really, I'm also just outraged to see the scale of destruction that the fossil fuel industry is capable of committing and still driving.
I'm impressed with the language choices I've heard so far. These fossil fuel wars, the power of the people is greater than people in power. So thank you both for so eloquently sharing your perspectives on this recent action. I want to jump to another continent. Sim, you were part of the Just Look Up action in LA. Can you tell us what that scene was like?
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. We had a variety of different coalitions in Los Angeles that are focused on environmental solutions and addressing the climate crisis and holding California elected officials accountable. But it was absolutely powerful. We shut down City National Bank the morning. They didn't know, but we were coming. Just rolled up some drums and had some chanting. It was incredibly powerful and amazing. But that's how the action turned out. It's great.
And Kaylin, why don't you tap in here as well? What are some of these strikes, in your context? What is the target of the strike? What is the ask or the demand with respect to fossil fuels, teachers, and money?
Oh God. I mean, our strikes, like, it ranges from a lot of different, I mean, we target a lot of different people, especially like in California, we're seen as this progressive state. But what people like actually don't know is that California is like really big into the fossil fuel industry, and like CTA, like they were #2 in fossil fuel here. Like they invested like $5 billion. And then we have banks like here in California who are contributors to like deforestation and a bunch of other like they contribute to a bunch of like other stuff that's harming the environment and people as well. So I mean that's really something that we focus on in the strikes.
Yeah.
Our demands are usually our demands are usually just like
they're like focused on divestment. So right now we have a strike coming up on March 25th. We're calling on the CTA, so California's Teacher Association, to support the CalSTRS and CalPERS divestment. They have well over $30 billion in the fossil fuel industry. They have millions of dollars in shares in Russian state-owned oil companies. So, you know, California teachers, their pensions are being used to fund this war in Ukraine. It's you know, this thing stretches across borders. It's being used to fund the West Sudan pipeline, you know, and it's also being used to fund, you know, drilling in our backyard. And I live like by Inglewood. We have oil fields everywhere in California. And, you know, California teachers, unfortunately, their money is being used to fund these things.
You know, that's again, the analysis of where power sits is really sophisticated and beautiful to see. I think if someone is still teaching right now after everything that schools have been through with COVID, with the racial uprisings, like they're committed, you know, to children, they're committed to the future. And so I hope it's disappointing for them to discover that their own money that's trying to secure their future is undermining the very people who they've devoted their lives to. That's an inconsistency that must be resolved. So I applaud you, you know, on pushing for that.
Thank you.
This Total pipeline, I want to kind of close on understanding there is a thread that connects so many of these struggles, these nations, whether it's Ukraine, Uganda, et cetera. Can you talk about what is going on with the Chinese pipeline that's connecting through, as we heard earlier, through Uganda, through Tunisia, and what are you demanding of Total in terms of the big actions that we saw last week in Paris?
Thank you. Well, Uganda is a country where this oil pipeline, the East African crude oil pipeline, is going to be built, and it will be starting from Uganda's district called Hoima through Lake Victoria, Benson, to a port in Tanzania called Tanga. And this pipeline will be 1,445 kilometers long. It will be the world's longest heated oil pipeline, and it will be constructed by Total, which is a French company. The oil pipeline has come at a time when the world is shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy. While developed countries like France are turning to renewable energy, poor countries like Uganda, with the help of corporations from developed countries, are forced to see a future in fossil fuels, and yet this future doesn't exist. So this project poses very grave risks to the people and to nature worldwide. And in my home village, people are already displaced. Their incomes and livelihoods are affected. It has unacceptable risks to water, resources, biodiversity, natural habitats, and the like. Over 500 chimpanzees will be displaced. Elephants will be displaced. And this is a time where our biodiversity as Ugandans is greatly extincting. Climate catastrophes are worsening, and Total is aiming at unlocking a new source of carbon emissions that will either prove financially unviable or produce unacceptable climate harm. Over 100,000 people are being displaced by this project. 400 villages, both in Uganda and Tanzania, are being displaced. About a third of this pipeline will be built on Lake Victoria Basin. We know that this is the biggest freshwater body in Africa, but also the second biggest freshwater body in the world. Over 40 million lives depend on this. This is a very big asset for us. And in case of an oil spill, this will be like a suicide mission.
Yeah.
An estimated 34.3 million metric tons of carbon is expected to be produced per year by this pipeline. And this is to ridiculously undermine the efforts of reducing global emissions to combat climate change. Total stopped people in my country from using their land for agriculture, which was being acquired to develop the pipeline, even before compensation. Amid this non-compensation, starvation, and the climate crisis came the displacement, but also COVID-19, leaving many people impoverished, especially women and children. And each day that comes by in Uganda has its own struggles, from floods, droughts, landslides, rising temperatures, diseases, and the like. What Uganda really needs is protecting and preserving biodiversity. We need renewable energy technologies that will provide clean jobs to people, and all this is happening. So I was in Paris to speak on behalf of the people who are already displaced by the ECO project, and also people whose land has been taken as a result of this selfish project. And this weekend, I am here to tell each and everyone about the ECO project, because this is a disastrous project. I am here to speak for the large groups of Eastern chimpanzees, African elephants, birds, insects that have nowhere to go because of their habitat has been taken away and severely affected by the ECO. I'm here to speak for the children in Uganda who are suffering climate change-induced hunger. I'm here to inform you that the oil spills from ECO pose a particularly worrying risk for further devastating human impacts. It is disheartening to see developed countries like France funding new oil pipelines in Africa while investing in renewable energy in their own countries. The climate crisis was not caused by the fresh waters in Lake Victoria, not the mountain gorillas, not Africans themselves, but by burning fossil fuel from global north companies such as Total. We Ugandans aspire to develop, but not at the expense of our lives. We are not against our country's development, but we need sustainable development that will benefit everyone, even future generations. We need development that does not negatively affect the elephants people love to see in Africa. We know for the fact that all oil-producing countries, especially in Africa, are suffering untold environmental challenges, and we do not want to take the same route. We are farmers, and our lives depend on it. We too dream of having clean energies, clean cities for a sustainable future, but the ECO project will affect us. It will affect nations. It will affect the entire world. And we youth, especially, because we have the most of our lives ahead. We can't be in this mess. We deserve a safe and healthy planet.
Just paused, but I want to use that pause because I understand, Dominica, you're losing power. Thank you for hanging in with us. Is there anything else you want to say before we close this? I'll give you a shot first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question that goes in my head for some days recently is, how many bombs must fall? How many thousands of communities need to be displaced? How many ecosystems must be completely broken for us to finally realize that the world that is governed by oil, gas, and coal only means destruction? Our governments claim that those fossil fuels can bring about energy safety, they bring about development, they bring about growth. This means nothing. Safety, care, healthy and stable life cannot be guaranteed by the tools of destruction which fossil fuels are. And so I'm asking them, and I'm asking the politicians in Poland, I'll be asking that with our delegation of Ukrainian Polish activists going to Brussels next week for the European Council Summit. We'll be asking them, how many bombs, how many more thousands of communities, homes must be completely vanished and disappeared from this earth for us to finally free ourselves from this toxic relationship with fossil fuels.
Dominica, thank you so very much. Hilda, thank you so much very much. Sim and Kaylin, thank you for fighting for all of our futures. I want to remind people of an action that you can support and join this upcoming Friday, March 25th. Go to fridaysforfuture.org, March25, March numbers 2 and 5, to support the effort to get the California Teachers Association to divest from destroying the world of the students they so love. I also want to encourage people to support this effort to stop the EACOP pipeline. That's going to be the longest one in the world. You can visit the website stopeacop.net. That is stopeacop.net. You've been tuning in to wonderful, inspiring, seemingly boundless energy from the next generation of folks, ensuring that there will be next generations of folks. So thank you all so much for joining. And I say that not just to my fellow panelists just now, but to you. Yeah, you right there. I'm talking just to you, because we've been here for almost 2 hours, and I want to thank you for joining. We started out talking about how everything from 9/11 to the killings of indigenous peoples to the invasion of Ukraine, that they all had this one thing in common, that they could only have happened with the help of big oil and our dependence on this destructive force to try to create a future, which is by necessity oxymoronic. And as the world is uniting against Putin, we need to understand that Putin is the face of big oil in all of its devastating possibilities. So the movement to drill, baby, drill is like an IRL don't look up movement from that film that we celebrate and use to inspire us in real life. And the movement of indigenous wisdom rising, and the movement of renewable energy and storytelling that humanizes each other. That's the Just Look Up Alliance. Again, use that hashtag, check it out, amplify it. Check out the Twitter accounts. We got Just Look Up Alliance on Instagram. We got Look Up Alliance without the just on Twitter. You can follow both of those and engage with both of those. Mark Ruffalo was on fire. He came with it. He came with it, helping us remember that we have a responsibility to each other, that the power of our art and our money can do good, especially when we combine them. Melina and Chief Namax grounded us in the urgency of the moment for indigenous people and our opportunity to ensure that there are no more dirty banks. 3 main demands. Number 1, Royal Bank of Canada, pull out of the CGL pipeline. Number 2, Royal Bank of Canada, uphold and respect the rights of indigenous people. Number 3, Royal Bank of Canada, stop financing fossil fuel extraction, which is exacerbating climate change. Which, by the way, just like if you think about the math on that, like the wrath of the math, it's a terrible investment. It's a terrible investment in long-term return. It just doesn't make sense. Invest in something that is renewable and regenerative and accretive. You know, I could speak your financial language too, and you're throwing good money after bad. In some cases, bad money after bad. So fix that. Get on the right side of not just history, but the future, so you can be a part of it too. Keep making money. Then a wider lens, how the opposite of Putin and Royal Bank of Canada and big oil, we talked about how that's grounded in indigenous wisdom, in being in awe of and in relationship to all life around us. Svetlana from Ukraine spoke so passionately about herself as a Ukrainian and the need to stand with Ukraine in many ways, and how the invasion of Ukraine is powered by big oil. Bill McKibben gave us a vision for President Biden, something that doesn't depend on the great senator from West Virginia, a path to empower Europe with heat pumps to no longer depend on oil and gas from Russia. These heat pumps will be a massive jolt for the US economy, and all Biden needs to do is have the courage to do it. So let's holler at our boy and get him to do what we know he can and certainly should do. We spent time today talking about how we need to be less individualistic and more collaborative in our movements. I was struck by these climate activists, not only what they're doing on the subject of climate, but how the networks they built to help save this planet and the people on it, they've activated to help save each other from conflict zones that are live right now, using those networks to get people out of harm's way of missiles and bombs dropping on them. Adam McKay, Meryl Streep, what can I say? I don't hang out with Meryl Streep every Saturday, but today was a very, very good day. And it was really wonderful to see them rising in these movements, sharing their awakening. And as no one's fully woke, but we are all waking up, and we can all wake up a bit more, and using the power again of money and art to change the world. Dominica, Sim, Kale, Hilda, thank you for giving us the greatest hope of all, to fight for the future, to fight for ourselves, and to stop this total pipeline. Totally. It's been an amazing day. I have lots of thanks to get through. So many people helped pull this off using their talent to bring this stream, help us all see how we could make the world better for ourselves. Thank you to our ASL translators, Kaysen Maddox and Crystal Butler. Thank you to all of our guest speakers. Thank you to all of our producers, act.tv, Avaz, Jay Ponte, and a huge thanks to you, the viewer, the participant, the tweeter, the hashtagger, the story resharer. Thank you for your attention, that most precious and most controllable resource of all. Regardless of how much land you got, how much money you don't have, we have the power to choose where we put our mind's attention to. So thank you for sharing your power with us. Climate change is a global problem, but it's one we can solve together. We've got the power to do it. And on me, I'm Baratunde, and it's been my distinct pleasure to do this. I'm doing this because I believe that we have made some terrible decisions, and I know we can make better ones. A big mission in my life is for all of us to interpret this word citizen as a verb, not a legalistic border between peoples, but an opportunity for us to actually flex our power as the people, which is greater than the people with power. We heard so beautifully from Uganda today on that score. So citizen as verb is what we're all trying to do here, to show up and participate in ways we can, to build relationships with ourselves, with others in the planet around us, and recognize the myth that we are separate from each other or from the trees and the wind and the waters that power us, to understand power in all the ways we can use it financially, artistically, creatively, and to do this to benefit the collective, not just our individual selves. Because when we only think about our individual selves, we ensure the death of our collective self. And we are highly dependent on that, because interdependence is the key to all life. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I am going to have a very delayed lunch. And for all the technical challenges that we smoothly roll through, I want to thank all those minions in the cloud for helping us pull this off so very much. Remember, just look up, and then let's walk toward the world we want to live in. Thank you.